Look around you. Seriously, take a moment. Everything you see, the roads you drive on, the massive skyscrapers, the complex technology in your hand, it was all built on the bedrock of human knowledge. We, as a species, believe we understand the world. We have history books, timelines, and neat, clean narratives about how civilization progressed from the Stone Age to where we are now. But what if I told you that entire crucial chapters of that story are missing? What if the people who came before us achieved feats of engineering and possessed knowledge that still, to this day, completely baffle our smartest scientists and archaeologists? We're not talking about simple ruins or faded pottery here. We're talking about colossal monuments, carved with machine-like precision, built by people who supposedly only had basic copper tools. We're talking about entire structures that rewrite the timeline of human civilization itself. Today, we're not just looking at the famous ones, though we will touch on the giants, the pyramids that puncture the sky, the colossal circles of Stonehenge, and the mysterious lines etched into the Peruvian desert. We're going deeper. We're venturing into the shadows to uncover the secrets held within impossible, lesser-known locations. Have you ever heard of a massive underground network of perfectly carved caves in China that has no historical record whatsoever? Or gigantic building blocks in Lebanon so heavy our best modern cranes would struggle to lift them? These 12 locations are archaeological cold cases. They are the artifacts that refuse to fit into our historical narrative, forcing us to ask the uncomfortable question: did an ancient, technologically advanced culture exist? One that was perhaps wiped clean from history? Get ready to challenge everything you thought you knew about the ancient world. From impossible stonework to secret messages in lost languages, these are the 12 unsolved ancient mysteries that still baffle archaeologists. You might want to sit down for this one. Let's begin with the undisputed champion of ancient mystery, the only remaining wonder of the ancient world, the Great Pyramid of Giza. When you stand before this monument, the statistics alone are overwhelming. We're talking about a structure that weighs approximately 6 million tons, constructed from over 2 million massive limestone and granite blocks. Some of these individual granite stones, particularly those used to roof the delicate chambers deep within the structure, like the King's Chamber, weigh up to 80 tons. To put that into perspective, an 80-ton block is roughly the weight of a modern jet airliner. And these ancient builders, supposedly using simple copper chisels and brute force, lifted and positioned them hundreds of feet in the air. Now, history books tell us this was built over a 20-year period, using only ramps, ropes, and sheer manpower. But let's engage our skepticism for a moment. If they worked continuously, day and night, 365 days a year for 20 years, they would have had to quarry, transport, and perfectly place a block every 2.5 minutes, non-stop. Think about the logistics of supplying food and water to a workforce of tens of thousands, sustaining that superhuman effort for 2 decades. And the precision, that's what truly breaks the traditional narrative. The 4 base sides are aligned almost perfectly with the cardinal directions: north, south, east, west. And the base itself is level within a fraction of an inch across the entire 13-acre footprint. We're talking about precision comparable to modern optical tooling. Furthermore, the casing stones were cut so precisely that you couldn't even slip a piece of paper between them. How could they achieve this level of relentless speed and astronomical accuracy without the benefit of steel tools, cranes, or even the fully developed wheel? Were the long, slow, muddy ramps truly the answer? Or did the ancient Egyptians possess a lost scientific secret, a method of levitation, sonic resonance, or some other form of technology that allowed them to manipulate these impossible stones like simple Lego bricks? The pyramid stands as a permanent, frustrating challenge to our understanding of ancient capability. Next, we cross the globe to the windswept Salisbury Plain in England, home to the enigmatic stone circle known as Stonehenge. While it may not reach the height of the pyramids, the sheer effort and planning involved make this mystery just as profound. Archaeologists trace the site's construction back to roughly 3000 BC, meaning it's actually older than the Great Pyramid. The structure is composed of two types of stone: the massive sarsen stones, which form the outer ring, and the smaller but equally crucial bluestones. The sarsen stones are locally sourced, weighing up to 30 tons each. But the bluestones are the true puzzle. They were quarried from the Preseli Hills in Wales, a staggering 140 miles away. Now think about that journey in the Neolithic era. We're talking about people who existed before metal was common, before the advent of the wheel for transport. How did these prehistoric people, using only rudimentary tools, manage to transport dozens of 5-ton stones across such a huge distance, crossing rivers, hills, and rough terrain? Was it hauled on sledges? Was it rolled on massive logs? Was it carried by rafts on rivers and along the coast? None of the proposed theories, which often involve hundreds of people and incredible logistical coordination, fully account for the required effort without modern tools. And the purpose, that remains the second major headache. Theories abound. Was it a ritualistic burial ground, a center for healing, or most popularly, a sophisticated astronomical calendar? The stones are precisely positioned to align with the sunrise on the summer solstice and the sunset on the winter solstice, proving its builders were keen observers of the cosmos. But why dedicate such impossible generations-long effort to track the seasons? It wasn't just about survival, it was about an obsession with the sky, a deep spiritual or scientific motivation that drove an entire culture to move mountains, literally, to build this sacred observatory. Stonehenge forces us to recognize that our so-called primitive ancestors had an advanced shared scientific understanding and a drive so powerful it defied all logistical common sense. Flying across the Pacific to the arid plateau of southern Peru, we encounter an entirely different kind of mystery: the Nazca Lines. These aren't monuments built up, but images carved into the earth itself, so vast they are only truly discernible from the air. They were discovered on a massive scale only after the invention of flight. Imagine hundreds of colossal geoglyphs etched into a 300-square-mile desert plain. You have perfect geometric shapes, spirals, and incredibly intricate figures of animals. A spider, a monkey with 9 fingers, a condor with a 400-foot wingspan, and a figure sometimes referred to as the astronaut. Some of these figures span hundreds of yards, yet their lines remain mathematically straight, sometimes for miles across rugged terrain. The technique itself was simple. The builders simply cleared the reddish-brown iron oxide pebbles to expose the lighter subsoil underneath, but the execution was anything but. The primary puzzle is twofold: purpose and perspective. If you are creating an image meant to be seen from hundreds of feet in the air, who precisely is the intended audience? Was it for the gods, a massive ritual offering meant to appeal to a higher power in the sky? Were they part of a complex, enormous calendar, perhaps related to tracking weather patterns or water sources in a very dry climate? Many theories suggest they were ritual pathways that pilgrims walked along. Perhaps even more baffling is how they achieved such perfect scale and symmetry without the ability to gain an aerial perspective during construction. Did they use sophisticated surveying techniques, relying on ropes, grids, and geometric proportions projected onto the ground? Or, as some more fringe but persistent theories suggest, did they somehow have access to technologies that allowed for elevated platforms, perhaps even rudimentary hot air balloons, that we know nothing about? The Nazca Lines offer a stunning vision of ancient artistic and engineering prowess, but their true meaning remains frustratingly locked in the skies above the Peruvian desert, challenging our every assumption about the technological limitations of the ancient world. Our next mystery takes us to one of the most remote inhabited places on Earth, Rapa Nui, or Easter Island. Scattered across this tiny, isolated volcanic island are nearly 1,000 colossal stone figures, the famous moai. These statues are breathtaking. They stand up to 33 feet tall and weigh up to 82 tons, almost the same weight as the heaviest blocks in the pyramids. They were carved directly from compressed volcanic ash inside the Rano Raraku quarry. And here lies the enduring, simple question. How did the islanders transport and erect them? Remember, this is a small island culture with no wheeled vehicles, no draft animals, and critically, limited resources, especially timber. Anthropologists have offered various theories. They might have been walked upright using ropes and rocking motions, rolled on logs, or perhaps pulled on sleds. But the energy and engineering required to move the largest moai for miles across uneven, undulating terrain is truly mind-boggling. The mystery is deepened by the fact that many statues were found either unfinished in the quarry or suddenly toppled over, known as hakakina, suggesting the project was abruptly abandoned or halted due to internal conflict. But the moai tell a deeper, darker story that goes beyond engineering. The effort required to carve, move, and erect these statues likely led to the massive deforestation of the island, as the builders used precious trees for rollers, sleds, and levers. The prevailing theory suggests that the obsession with the moai, perhaps symbols of their ancestors, clan leaders, or competition between tribes, led to a catastrophic ecological collapse. The resulting scarcity of resources, famine, and civil war caused the eventual destruction of the advanced culture that built them. The moai, therefore, are a chilling and poignant reminder that an ancient civilization can collapse not from an external invasion, but from the unsustainable pursuit of an impossible, all-consuming project. Finally, we move from the clearly physical to the captivatingly philosophical, examining the enduring legend of the lost city of Atlantis. Unlike our previous sites, Atlantis is primarily a story, a detailed narrative first written down by the Greek philosopher Plato around 360 BC. He described it not as a myth, but as a historical fact, a magnificent, powerful island civilization, technologically advanced, located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, which is the Strait of Gibraltar. Plato claimed Atlantis was built of concentric rings of land and water, rich in gold, silver, and exotic materials, and possessed a powerful naval empire that conquered parts of Europe and Africa. Crucially, he also established the timeline for its downfall, stating that Atlantis existed about 9,000 years before his own time. Its people, however, grew morally corrupt and arrogant, engaging in wars of aggression. As divine punishment, the entire island was consumed and sank into the ocean in a single day and night of misfortune. The mystery here isn't just where it is, but was it real at all? Most historians generally classify it as a cautionary tale, a philosophical device designed by Plato to illustrate the downfall of a perfect society corrupted by wealth and power. But the description is so detailed, so specific, that the search for a real, physical Atlantis has captivated researchers and dreamers for centuries. Potential candidates are numerous. The sudden collapse of the Minoan civilization after the devastating Thera volcano eruption in the Aegean, the eye-like geological structure in Mauritania known as the Richat structure, or the Eye of the Sahara, or sunken cities in the Mediterranean. If Atlantis was real, it represents the ultimate lost chapter. A civilization so advanced that it could be instantly wiped out by a cataclysm, leaving virtually no accepted trace. It serves as the ultimate, chilling warning about the sudden and complete fragility of even the greatest achievements. And until definitive, conclusive evidence is found, the question of whether a true super-civilization lies sleeping beneath the waves remains one of archaeology's greatest, most tantalizing unanswered prayers. We've seen the giants, the monuments so famous they define our image of the ancient world. But now, we leave the tourist trails. We're heading into the real rabbit hole, where the evidence is often more precise, more confusing, and far more challenging to the historical timeline we've accepted. Get ready to encounter the sites that truly make archaeologists lose sleep. These are the lesser-known 7, the shadow cases. Our first deep dive takes us to southeastern Turkey, to a remote hilltop known as Göbekli Tepe. If any single site completely demolishes the current historical narrative, it is this one. For centuries, the accepted timeline stated that humans began as simple hunter-gatherers. Then, around 10,000 years ago, they learned agriculture, settled down, and then began building complex structures like temples. Göbekli Tepe flips that timeline completely upside down. Discovered in the 1990s, this massive temple complex is estimated to be over 11,600 years old. That makes it thousands of years older than Stonehenge and the pyramids. The sheer age is the first shock. The people who built this were still technically hunter-gatherers. They had not yet perfected farming. Yet they organized themselves to carve, transport, and perfectly arrange massive, T-shaped limestone pillars, some weighing up to 20 tons, into meticulously planned circles. These pillars are carved with beautiful, complex reliefs of animals: snakes, boars, foxes, and birds. The second shock is its ultimate fate. After thousands of years of use, the entire site was deliberately and meticulously buried. They didn't abandon it, they covered it with earth and rock, preserving it perfectly. Why would a culture put so much effort into creating the world's first megalithic temple, only to suddenly decide to completely enter it for posterity? Göbekli Tepe proves that sophisticated religious and social organization, the desire to build monumental architecture, did not follow farming. It came first. The builders of this site possessed an advanced understanding of geometry and labor coordination that simply shouldn't have existed according to our textbooks. Now we travel to Zhejiang province in China, to a quiet village that sits atop one of the most baffling engineering feats ever discovered, the Longyu Grottos. This site is a mystery defined by its utter secrecy. In 1992, villagers draining a local pond discovered something incredible: a vast subterranean network of enormous hand-carved grottos. They found not one, not two, but 36 separate caves carved directly into solid siltstone. Each cave is massive, reaching heights of nearly 100 feet, and covers an area of almost 30,000 square meters. The volume of rock that was removed to create these chambers is estimated to be close to 1 million cubic meters. But here is the impossible part. These caves are mathematically perfect. They are symmetrical, with smooth walls and ceilings supported by expertly placed load-bearing columns. The walls are covered entirely with equidistant chisel marks, forming a uniform parallel pattern, suggesting a systematic, coordinated process using specific tools. The biggest secret of the Longyu Grottos isn't how they were built, though that remains challenging, but why there is absolutely no historical record of their existence. Not one mention in any imperial document, local history, or folklore. The amount of manpower and time required to execute this project would have been staggering. It could have taken thousands of laborers decades, yet it was executed in total silence. Were they mining? Were they barracks? A colossal imperial tomb? We have no idea. The Longyu Grottos exist outside of recorded history, challenging the integrity of Chinese historical records and implying a hidden, large-scale society that operated in complete secrecy. Let's move to the Bekaa Valley in Lebanon, the site of the ancient Roman temple of Jupiter at Baalbek. While the visible ruins are Roman, the true mystery lies beneath, or rather, in the colossal foundation stones the Romans built upon. The Roman temple is impressive, but it's the supporting wall, the foundation, that defies logic. Here, we find the trilithon, 3 massive finished limestone blocks positioned side by side. Each of these stones weighs an estimated 800 tons. Let that sink in. An 800-ton block. These are considered the heaviest building blocks ever used in construction in the history of the world. Furthermore, in a nearby quarry, there lies the Stone of the South, an even larger finished block weighing an unbelievable 1,000 to 1,200 tons, which was never moved. The mystery is fundamentally an engineering one. How were these 800-ton blocks quarried, transported, lifted, and placed with such accuracy? Even with our most powerful modern equipment, our cranes and heavy machinery, it would be a struggle to move these blocks without shattering them. To accomplish this using ancient techniques requires a monumental effort we simply cannot replicate or even fully understand. The Romans who built the Temple of Jupiter here did not use these stones. They found them and built their temple on top of them, suggesting the megalithic foundation belongs to a much older, forgotten culture. Were these stones meant for a purpose beyond the Roman imagination? The Baalbek Trilithon demands that we pause and seriously reconsider the technological ceiling of the pre-Roman world. We return briefly to Egypt, but not to the famous pyramids. We look instead at a small, unassuming artifact found in a tomb near the Step Pyramid of Djoser, known as the Saqqara bird. Discovered in 1898, this 6-inch-long wooden object looks like a simple bird carving at first glance. But upon closer inspection, it possesses distinct features that defy its classification as a mere toy or decoration. It lacks the feet of a bird, and crucially, its wings are shaped like those of a modern aircraft wing. They are tapered, thicker at the center, and thinner at the tips. A cambered airfoil shape. This aerodynamic design is essential for generating lift. So the question is, what exactly is the Saqqara bird? Conventional archaeologists argue it is a simple stylized bird or a weather vane, but aviation enthusiasts and alternative historians point to its highly specific aerodynamic characteristics. If it was an attempt at flight or a model of a flying machine, it suggests the ancient Egyptians possessed knowledge of aerodynamics thousands of years before the invention of the glider. This would imply an incredible leap in understanding of physics, or perhaps evidence of a forgotten technology. The artifact remains in the Cairo Museum, classified as a model of a bird. But the controversy highlights a critical theme in archaeology. Are we willing to accept evidence that challenges our understanding of what was technologically possible in the ancient world? Or do we immediately categorize anomalies like the Saqqara bird as mere coincidence or ritualistic art, simply because we cannot reconcile it with our historical timeline? We shift now from stone and wood to paper and ink to perhaps the most mysterious book on earth, the Voynich manuscript. Named after the book dealer who acquired it in 1912, this manuscript is a handwritten, illustrated codex dating back to the early 15th century. It's about 240 pages long, filled with beautiful, strange drawings of plants, astrological charts, pharmaceutical recipes, and bizarre humanoid figures. But its most unique feature is its text. The entire book is written in an unknown language or script that has defied decryption by cryptographers, linguists, and code breakers for over a century, including top minds from World War I and II. The mystery splits into three main possibilities. First, is it a genuine lost language? Analysis shows the script follows linguistic rules. There are consistent patterns and frequencies, suggesting it's not random gibberish. Second, is it a complex hoax or uncrackable cipher? Perhaps it was created by an alchemist or charlatan to sell as a book of secrets. Third, is it a unique language designed for the illustrations, known only to one person or a very small group? The illustrations are just as confusing. The botanical section depicts plants that do not seem to exist on Earth. The astronomical section shows unique cosmological diagrams, and the biological section shows naked women bathing in strange liquid systems. The Voynich manuscript is a window into a mind, a culture, or perhaps even a world that we simply cannot access. It remains a persistent reminder that powerful, complex knowledge can be preserved in plain sight, yet remain entirely impenetrable. Traveling high into the Andes Mountains of Bolivia, near Lake Titicaca, we encounter the site of Pumapunku, part of the Tiwanaku complex. This is arguably the most technologically baffling ruin on our list. Pumapunku is defined by its stonework. The ruins are characterized by thousands of perfectly cut blocks of andesite and red sandstone. The blocks are not just large, they are engineered with a precision that seems alien to their supposed age, around 500 to 600 AD. We're talking about perfect right angles, stones interlocked with complex T-shaped grooves, and the infamous H-blocks. Identical, modular building components cut with such sharp edges and flawless flatness that they look like they were made by a modern water jet or laser cutter. The mystery is twofold. First, the material and tools. Andesite is an extremely hard volcanic rock, second only to diamond in hardness. How did an ancient culture with only rudimentary bronze tools achieve these hyper-precise, hyper-flat, razor-sharp cuts? Bronze tools simply aren't hard enough to work andesite like this. They would quickly dull and deform. The cut suggests sophisticated rotational or high-speed abrasive tools. Second, the modular design. The H-blocks are a clear example of standardized, interchangeable parts, much like a modern construction kit. This suggests an architectural blueprint and manufacturing process that far exceeds anything we attribute to this era. Pumapunku forces us to ask, did the builders possess a forgotten method of softening or manipulating stone? Or did they have access to a technology that was somehow lost to history when the civilization collapsed? The ruins stand today as the ultimate proof that machine-like precision existed in the ancient world. Our final stop is the National Museum of Iraq, home to a small, unassuming artifact known as the Baghdad Battery. This discovery is one of the most controversial pieces of evidence suggesting forgotten ancient technology. The artifact consists of a simple terracotta jar, approximately 6 inches high, containing a copper cylinder held in place by an asphalt plug. Inside the copper cylinder, there was a suspended iron rod. When reconstructed and filled with an acidic liquid like vinegar or grape juice, which would have been readily available in ancient Mesopotamia, this device functions perfectly as a basic galvanic battery, capable of producing a small electrical voltage of about 1.5 to 2 volts. Dating back to the Parthian era, around 250 BC to 224 AD, the discovery raises an explosive question. Did ancient cultures possess knowledge of electricity? If it was indeed used as a battery, the question then becomes, what was it used for? Theories are wide-ranging. Was it used for electroplating, applying a thin layer of gold or silver to objects, a process otherwise thought to have been invented much later? Was it used for medicinal purposes, perhaps a mild form of electrotherapy or pain relief? Or was it simply a series of containers used to store sacred scrolls, with the metals being a secondary function? Conventional archaeology often dismisses it as a simple storage container, but the undeniable functionality as a battery remains. The Baghdad Battery suggests a level of forgotten scientific knowledge that is difficult to reconcile with the traditional historical narrative. It reminds us that our ancestors may have experimented with and mastered forces of nature, like electricity, only to have that knowledge wiped clean by the collapse of empires, leaving behind only the most baffling physical proof. We've now journeyed across continents and time, exploring 12 incredible locations, from the well-trodden grounds of Giza and Stonehenge to the hidden, machine-cut stones of Pumapunku and the silent grottos of Longyu. Now, it's time to move beyond simple description and ask the critical question. What does this tapestry of mystery actually tell us about the human story? Look closely at the evidence we've uncovered. You begin to see 3 recurring, interconnected themes that fundamentally challenge the neat, linear narrative of human history we've been taught. The first theme is impossible precision and scale. Think about the 800-ton blocks of Baalbek, the perfect right angles on the andesite of Pumapunku, and the near-laser precision used to align the Great Pyramid. If the builders only had rudimentary tools, copper chisels, sleds, and muscle, why did they consistently choose the hardest possible materials and the most logistically difficult methods? They were clearly not limited by the materials, but by our current understanding of their technology. It suggests that these ancient people possessed techniques for stonework, perhaps involving methods of sound resonance, chemical softening, or advanced abrasive processes, that we have completely forgotten, forcing us to admit that in some areas, their engineering surpassed our modern equivalents. The true mystery isn't that they built them, but how they built them so fast and so perfectly. This uniformity of high precision across geographically separate cultures, from Egypt to Bolivia, suggests either a shared, lost technological base or an unknown global influence. The second theme is the shattered historical timeline. Göbekli Tepe is the prime example here. A complex, monumental temple built by hunter-gatherers before agriculture. This entirely invalidates the foundation of our civilization model, which states that sedentary life and farming had to precede large-scale architecture. Then you have the Longyu Grottos, a colossal engineering project executed in total historical silence. These sites prove that sophisticated knowledge, organized labor, and ambitious design were present thousands of years earlier than our textbooks claim. They show us that human history isn't a slow, steady climb. It's a jagged line with sudden, inexplicable peaks of forgotten achievement. The question is, what other peaks of ancient genius have been buried, flooded, or simply ignored because they don't fit our timeline? Finally, the third theme is the fragility of knowledge. The Moai builders destroyed their own ecosystem for an impossible project. The citizens of Plato's Atlantis were wiped out in a single day. The builders of Göbekli Tepe deliberately buried their own sacred masterpiece. The Baghdad Battery and the Saqqara bird hint at forgotten sciences like electricity and aerodynamics. All these phenomena point to the same terrifying conclusion. Knowledge is not permanent. Advanced civilizations can and do collapse completely, and when they fall, the specialized knowledge they held can vanish almost instantly, leaving behind only these baffling, physical anomalies as ghosts of their greatness. The true insight here is the challenge itself. These 12 mysteries are not failures of ancient people, they are failures of our imagination. They force us to be humble and acknowledge that our narrative is incomplete. The past is not simple. It is complex, capable of genius we haven't yet rediscovered, and hiding secrets that redefine the very story of us. The answer is out there, in the rocks, in the soil, and in the forgotten languages, waiting for the next generation to approach history, not with answers, but with a deeper, more profound set of questions. But what if I told you that some of the most baffling secrets aren't just mysteries? They are shocking revelations from our ancestors. Let's dive into the world as it was 10,000 years ago. Close your eyes for a moment and try to picture the world 10,000 years ago. What do you see? If you're like most people, you're probably imagining a group of cavemen, shaggy-haired hunters, huddled around a fire, clutching crude stone spears, struggling just to survive another freezing night. We've been taught a very specific story about our past. A slow, agonizing crawl from being primitive apes to eventually building the great civilizations of Egypt and Mesopotamia. It's a neat, linear timeline. It makes us feel superior. But what if that story is fundamentally wrong? What if I told you that while the last mammoths were still roaming the earth, our ancestors were already performing complex tasks that should have been impossible? We're talking about massive stone temples built with astronomical precision, thousands of years before the invention of the wheel. We're talking about sunken cities, sitting silently at the bottom of the ocean, and eerie wooden idols carved with a symbolic language we still can't decode. In the last few decades, archaeology hasn't just found old stuff. It has found glitches in our history, discoveries that shouldn't exist according to our textbooks. These findings don't just change a few dates on a map. They shatter our entire understanding of what the human brain was capable of at the end of the Ice Age. Why were these people obsessed with the stars? How did they move 20-ton stones without beasts of burden? And why did they suddenly decide to bury their most magnificent creations deep underground, as if they wanted them to stay hidden for eternity? Today, we are stripping away the myths of primitive man. We are going on a journey across the globe, from the dusty hills of Turkey to the freezing swamps of Russia and the depths of the Mediterranean Sea. I'm going to show you 7 archaeological discoveries that will not only shock you, but will make you question everything you thought you knew about where we came from. Prepare yourself, because the world of 10,000 years ago wasn't just a struggle for survival. It was a world of genius, mystery, and shadows that we are only just beginning to see. Our first stop takes us to the dusty, rolling hills of southeastern Turkey, to a place the locals call Potbelly Hill, or in Turkish, Göbekli Tepe. For decades, this was just another mound. Shepherds would graze their flocks here, occasionally tripping over a limestone slab sticking out of the dirt, thinking it was nothing more than an old medieval grave. But in 1994, a German archaeologist named Klaus Schmidt arrived. He looked at those flint tools scattered on the surface and realized something the rest of the world had missed. This wasn't a graveyard. This was a mountain of secrets. And as he began to dig, he didn't just find ruins, he found a glitch in human history. Imagine standing in a pit, looking up at massive T-shaped limestone pillars. Some of them are nearly 20 feet tall. Some weigh as much as 20 tons. That's the weight of 3 African elephants. Now, here is the part that should make your skin crawl. These pillars were carved, transported, and erected over 11,500 years ago. Let's put that into perspective. This site is 7,000 years older than the Great Pyramid of Giza. It is 6,000 years older than Stonehenge. When Göbekli Tepe was being built, the last mammoths were still walking the earth. Most of the world was still trapped in the tail end of the Ice Age. But it's not just the age that's shocking, it's the artistry. These aren't just rough-hewn rocks, they are masterpieces. Carved into the stone are high-relief sculptures of lions, scorpions, vultures, and foxes. The craftsmanship is so precise, so deliberate, that it looks like it was made by a civilization at its peak, not by primitive people who hadn't even invented the wheel yet. Think about that for a second. No wheels, no metal tools, no domesticated animals to pull the heavy loads, just human muscle, stone hammers, and an obsession that drove hundreds of people to work together for generations. For over a century, the standard model of history told us a very simple story. It said, first, humans invented farming. Then, because they had extra food, they stayed in one place and built villages. Then, they built cities. And finally, once they were organized, they built temples and developed religion. It's a logical progression, right? Stomach first, soul later. Göbekli Tepe flipped that entire timeline on its head. There is no sign of a city here. No houses, no kitchens, no trash pits, no nearby water source. This wasn't a place where people lived, it was a place where they gathered. This discovery forced archaeologists to accept a radical new truth. The temple came before the city. It was the urge to worship, the need to connect with the divine or the ancestors, that forced our ancestors to organize. To feed the hundreds of workers needed to move these 20-ton stones, they had to find a more reliable food source than just hunting. And so they began to domesticate wild wheat. Religion didn't come after agriculture. Religion was the spark that invented agriculture. But the mysteries don't stop there. As Klaus Schmidt and his team dug deeper, they found something even more unsettling. Around 8,000 BCE, after being used for over 1,000 years, Göbekli Tepe wasn't just abandoned. It wasn't destroyed by an enemy or leveled by an earthquake. It was buried, deliberately, carefully, by hand. The people who built it spent years hauling hundreds of tons of dirt and rubble to cover up their masterpiece, turning the world's first temple into an artificial hill. Why? Were they protecting it? Were they killing the temple once its purpose was served? Or were they trying to hide something from the future? We've only excavated about 5% of the site. Ground-penetrating radar shows there are at least 20 more of these stone circles still sleeping under the earth. We are looking at a complex so vast, so ancient, and so sophisticated that it makes everything we thought we knew about the Stone Age look like a fairy tale. Göbekli Tepe is a ghost that haunts our history books. It's a reminder that 10,000 years ago, our ancestors weren't just struggling to survive. They were staring at the stars, carving their myths into stone, and building monuments that were designed to outlast time itself. For our second discovery, we are leaving the sun-drenched hills of Turkey and traveling thousands of miles north into the cold, dark, and damp heart of the Ural Mountains in Russia. Picture this. It's the year 1894. A group of gold miners is working in a peat bog called Shigir. They aren't looking for history, they're looking for riches. But as they dig through the thick, oxygen-free mud, their shovels hit something hard. Something that isn't gold. They reach into the black muck and pull out a massive, terrifying wooden face staring back at them. They had just discovered what we now call the Shigir idol. At first glance, it looks like something out of a nightmare or a modern art gallery. It's a towering plank of larch wood, originally over 17 feet tall, That's about the height of a two-story building. Its face is flat, with deep-set eyes and a wide-open mouth, as if it's been caught in a silent scream for eternity. Its body is covered in mysterious geometric patterns, zigzags, lines, and chevrons. For over a century, scientists didn't know what to make of it. They looked at the wood and thought, maybe it's 2,000 years old? Maybe 3,000? After all, wood is supposed to rot. It's organic. It's fragile. In the world of archaeology, wood is a vanishing history. Usually, only stone survives. But the peat bog is a miracle. Because there was no oxygen in that swamp, the bacteria that eat wood couldn't survive. The bog acted like a time capsule, freezing this wooden ghost in time. In 2014, a team of German and Russian scientists decided to end the debate. They took tiny samples from the core of the idol and used ultra-precise carbon dating. When the results came back, the scientific world went into shock. The Shigir idol isn't 2,000 years old. It's 11,500 years old. Let that sink in. This wooden statue is more than twice as old as the Egyptian pyramids. It was carved at the exact same time as Göbekli Tepe. While the people in Turkey were carving stone, the people in the frozen north were carving wood. But who were these people? We used to think that the hunter-gatherers of the Ural Mountains were simple, nomadic tribes, just trying to find their next meal. We assumed they didn't have the time or the brain power for complex art or religion. The Shigir idol proves we were dead wrong. Look closer at the carvings. It's not just one face. As researchers analyze the patterns, they realize there are actually 8 faces hidden within the geometric lines of its body. Some are at the front, some at the back, stacked on top of each other. It's a totem pole of spirits. And then there are the tools. Scientists used high-resolution microscopes to look at the marks on the wood. They discovered that the artists didn't use metal, they used beaver teeth. They sharpened the lower jaws of beavers to create fine chisels that could carve into the hard larch wood. Can you imagine the patience? The skill? This wasn't a hobby. This was a dedicated professional work of spiritual engineering. But what does it say? This is the most frustrating and fascinating part. Many archaeologists believe the geometric patterns are a form of coded language. They aren't just decorations. The lines, the triangles, the zigzags, they represent information. Maybe they represent a map of the world, or a hierarchy of gods, or the boundary between the world of the living and the world of the dead. We are looking at a 10,000-year-old book made of wood that we no longer know how to read. The Shigir idol is a shock because it reminds us of everything we've lost. For every stone temple like Göbekli Tepe that survived, there were likely thousands of wooden masterpieces that rotted away into nothingness. Our ancestors' world was likely filled with color, wood carvings, and complex symbolism that the earth has simply swallowed up. This idol is a lone survivor. It's a messenger from a lost civilization that was just as intellectually and spiritually complex as our own. It stands there with its mouth open, trying to tell us a story from 11,500 years ago, and we are only just beginning to listen. For our third discovery, we need to hold our breath and dive. We are heading to the eastern Mediterranean, just a few hundred meters off the coast of Israel, near a place called Atlit. The year was 1984. Marine archaeologist Ehud Galili was surveying the seabed after a heavy storm had shifted the sands. He wasn't looking for a lost civilization, he was looking for shipwrecks. But as the murky water cleared, he saw something that shouldn't be there. Not a ship, but a wall. Then a house, and then a perfect circle of standing stones. He had stumbled upon Atlit Yam, a sprawling 10,000-year-old village that had been swallowed by the sea. Now, when we hear underwater city, we often think of the myth of Atlantis. But Atlit Yam is real. It's a massive site covering nearly 10 acres. And because it was submerged so quickly and covered by layers of sand, it is one of the best preserved prehistoric settlements ever found. It's like a Neolithic Pompeii, but instead of ash, it was preserved by salt and silt. As you swim through the site, you can see stone foundations for houses, paved courtyards, and even storage pits. But the most haunting part? The ritual stone circle. Imagine 7 massive megaliths, each about 1 to 2 meters tall, still standing in a circle around a freshwater spring. These stones have cup marks carved into them, likely for offerings or rituals. 10,000 years ago, people stood in this exact spot, under the open sky, praying to their gods, long before the ocean claimed their world. But here's the shock that keeps scientists awake at night. The water wells. The people of Atlit Yam were master engineers. They dug stone-lined wells deep into the earth to reach fresh water. When the sea levels began to rise at the end of the Ice Age, the salt water started to seep into their fresh supply. We found layers of trash and bones at the bottom of these wells, which tells a tragic story. When the wells turned salty, the villagers used them as garbage pits. It was the beginning of the end. But the most emotional discovery came from the houses themselves. Archaeologists found the skeletons of a mother and a child, buried together. When scientists analyzed their DNA and their bones, they found something groundbreaking. These two individuals are the earliest known cases of tuberculosis in human history. 10,000 years ago, as we began to live closer together in villages and keep domesticated animals, our diseases were evolving alongside us. This mother and child are a silent testament to the very first pandemics of the human race. Why did Atlit Yam sink? For a long time, researchers thought a massive tsunami caused by the collapse of Mount Etna's flank had wiped it out in an instant. But more recent studies suggest a more haunting reality: slow, unstoppable climate change. As the glaciers from the last ice age melted, the Mediterranean rose, millimeter by millimeter, year by year. The people of Atlit Yam fought back. They built walls, they dug new wells, they tried to hold back the tide. But eventually, the ocean won. They were forced to pack up their lives, leave their ancestors buried in the mud, and move inland. Atlit Yam is a mirror held up to our own modern world. It's a reminder that 10,000 years ago, humanity was already facing the same existential threats we talk about today: rising seas, changing climates, and new diseases. When you look at those stones sitting in the blue silence of the Mediterranean, you realize that history isn't just a record of what we built. It's a record of what we lost. Atlit Yam is a ghost story that is 10,000 years old, warning us that the Earth has a memory much longer than our own. From the depths of the Mediterranean, we now travel to one of the lowest points on Earth, the Jordan Valley. Here lies a city that has become a legend: Jericho. Now, most people know Jericho from the Bible, the story of Joshua and the walls that came tumbling down. But archaeology has revealed a secret that is far more fascinating and much, much older. Beneath the layers of the Bronze Age, beneath the ruins of empires, lies a structure that changed everything we thought we knew about human society. In the 1950s, a pioneering British archaeologist named Kathleen Kenyon was digging a massive trench through the Tell of Jericho. As she went deeper, she struck something solid. It wasn't just a wall. It was a massive circular stone tower. This is the Tower of Jericho. It stands nearly 28 feet high. That's about 3 stories tall. It's 30 feet wide at the base, and it was built around 8,000 BCE. Think about that date. 10,000 years ago. At this time, the rest of the world was mostly living in temporary huts made of wood and animal skins. But here, in the desert heat, people were building with massive, heavy stones. This was the world's first skyscraper. But it's not just a pile of rocks. When Kenyon explored the tower, she found something incredible inside: a staircase. A perfectly preserved, internal stone staircase with 22 steps leading to the top. Imagine being a human 10,000 years ago. You've never seen a building higher than your own head. And suddenly you enter this cool, dark stone tower, and you begin to climb. Step by step, you rise above the earth. This was the first time in human history that we created a way to literally ascend towards the heavens. But why? Why spend all that effort? Researchers estimate it took over 11,000 man-days of labor to build this tower. In a world where every calorie mattered, where you had to hunt and gather just to survive, why waste so much energy on a tower? For a long time, archaeologists thought it was for defense, a lookout tower to spot enemies. Others thought it was a flood barrier against the Jordan River. But then, researchers from Tel Aviv University noticed something strange. They used computers to map the shadows of the nearby mountains 10,000 years ago. They discovered that on the summer solstice, the longest day of the year, the shadow of the largest mountain in the area hits the tower exactly at sunset. Then the shadow covers the entire village of Jericho, leaving the tower as the very last thing illuminated by the sun. This tower wasn't just a wall. It was a giant cosmic clock. It was an astronomical instrument designed to track the movements of the sun. It tells us that 10,000 years ago, people weren't just thinking about their next meal. They were obsessed with time. They were obsessed with the stars. But there is a darker side to this discovery. A tower like this doesn't build itself. You need a leader. You need someone to design it, someone to command the workers, and someone to punish those who don't work. The Tower of Jericho represents the birth of social hierarchy. It is the first evidence of a society where some people had more power than others. It is the moment we stopped being a group of equals and started becoming a society of leaders and followers. And who were these leaders? In the shadow of the tower, archaeologists found something chilling. Human skulls, plastered with clay and decorated with seashells in the eyes to make them look alive. These were ancestors, kept in the houses, watching the living. The Tower of Jericho is a shock because it shows that civilization, with all its brilliance and all its inequality, didn't start 5,000 years ago in Egypt. It started 10,000 years ago in a small desert oasis. It was the moment we decided to reach for the sky, to control time, and to dominate each other. It is the foundation of the modern world, built one stone step at a time. We leave the heat of the Middle East and head north to the mist-shrouded wetlands of North Yorkshire, England. The year is 1948. An amateur archaeologist named Flixton is walking through a boggy field called Starcar. At this time, 11,000 years ago, Britain wasn't an island yet. It was still connected to mainland Europe by a vast, low-lying plain called Doggerland. The environment was cold, damp, and filled with dense birch forests. But as archaeologists began to dig into the waterlogged soil of Starcar, they pulled out something that looked like it belonged in a modern-day horror movie. They found 24 headdresses, made from the skulls of red deer. Take a good look at these. They aren't just bones. These are the upper parts of a deer's skull, with the antlers still attached. But they had been carefully modified. 2 holes were bored through the back of the skull so that strings could be threaded through. The jagged edges of the bone were smoothed down, and the inside of the skull was hollowed out. Why? Because these weren't trophies. They were masks. They were designed to be worn by a human being. For decades, the standard explanation was hunting camouflage. People thought, okay, they wore these to sneak up on deer in the tall grass. And sure, that makes sense, but modern science has thrown a wrench into that simple theory. When researchers at the University of York analyzed the wear and tear on these masks, they found something fascinating. These headdresses were worn for long periods. They were comfortable, they were balanced, and most importantly, they were often painted with red ochre. Imagine the scene 11,000 years ago. It's the dead of night. The only light comes from a flickering bonfire. Around the fire, figures begin to dance. But they aren't quite human anymore. With the massive antlers swaying above their heads and their faces partially hidden by the bone, they have become something else. They have become the stagmen. This is the shock of Starcar. It gives us a window into the Paleolithic mind. For these people, the line between human and animal didn't really exist. They didn't think of themselves as superior to the deer. They saw the deer as a different kind of person. By wearing the mask, the shaman wasn't just pretending to be an animal. They believed they were literally crossing the bridge into the spirit world. They were taking on the power, the speed, and the soul of the beast. But Starcar reveals more than just rituals. It shows us a world of incredible craftsmanship. Remember the beaver teeth from the Shigir idol? We found them here too. The people of Starcar used beaver-toothed chisels to scrape and shape these masks. They were master carpenters of bone and antler. And then there's the tragedy of Starkar. This entire culture lived on Doggerland, a world that no longer exists. As the Ice Age ended and the sea levels rose, the same rise that swallowed Atlatyam, the land began to vanish. These people were the witnesses to the drowning of their world. Perhaps that's why the masks were so important. In a world that was literally disappearing beneath their feet, they turned to the spirits. They used these headdresses to ask the gods of the forest and the animals for protection against the rising tide. When you look into the empty eye sockets of a Starkar mask, you aren't just looking at an old bone. You are looking at the birth of theater, religion, and costume. You are looking at the moment humanity decided that reality wasn't enough, that we needed to put on a mask and become something more than just ourselves. It is a haunting reminder that even 11,000 years ago, we were a species of actors and dreamers, dancing in the dark against the end of the world. We've seen temples in Turkey and masks in England, but now we're crossing the ocean to the high desert of Nevada, USA. This is a place of scorching heat, cracked earth, and hidden caves that have remained undisturbed for millennia. The year was 1940. A husband and wife archaeology team, Sydney and Georgia Wheeler, were exploring a site called Spirit Cave. Inside, they found something that looked remarkably ordinary at first. 2 bodies wrapped in woven mats. Because the preservation was so good, you could still see the hair on their heads and the skin on their faces. The Wheelers assumed these people had died maybe 1,500 or 2,000 years ago. They boxed the remains up, sent them to a museum in Nevada, and for the next 50 years, the Spirit Cave mummy sat on a shelf, largely forgotten, a footnote in history. But in the 1990s, the world of archaeology was hit by a massive technological wave. Advanced carbon dating. Scientists decided to take a tiny sample of the woven matting surrounding the mummy. When the results came back, the museum staff thought there must be a mistake. The Spirit Cave mummy wasn't 2,000 years old. He was 9,400 years old. Think about what was happening 9,400 years ago. This man was living in North America, while the people of Jericho were building their tower, and the people of Göbekli Tepe were carving their pillars. He is one of the oldest mummies ever found in the world, much older than the famous mummies of Egypt. But the real shock wasn't just his age, it was his identity. For decades, a heated debate raged in the scientific community. Based on the shape of his skull, some researchers claimed he didn't look like modern Native Americans. They suggested he belonged to a lost group of travelers from Europe or East Asia. This sparked a massive legal battle with the fallen Paiute Shoshone tribe, who claimed the mummy was their ancestor and demanded he be returned for a proper burial. The mystery was finally solved in 2018 by one of the world's leading geneticists, S.K. Willerslev. He managed to extract DNA from the mummy's skull. The results were definitive. The Spirit Cave man was directly related to modern Native Americans. He wasn't a stranger or an invader. He was a pioneer. But look at how he lived. This wasn't a primitive nomad wandering aimlessly. He was buried with incredible care. He wore a pair of moccasins made from 3-toed horse skin, a species that is now extinct. He was wrapped in beautifully crafted mats made from tool reeds, woven with a complexity that rivals modern textiles. He lived in a world where Nevada wasn't a desert, but a lush marshland filled with lakes and wildlife. He was a master of his environment, a fisherman and a weaver. The Spirit Cave mummy is a shock, because it forces us to rewrite the history of the Americas. It tells us that 10,000 years ago, the New World was already an old world. It was already settled by people with deep cultures, sophisticated clothing, and a profound connection to the land, a connection that has lasted for nearly 100 centuries. In 2016, after decades in a museum box, the Spirit Cave man was finally returned to the Paiute Shoshone people. They buried him in a private ceremony, returning him to the earth he had walked nearly 10,000 years ago. He is no longer a specimen. He is an ancestor, and his story reminds us that the history of humanity is not written in books, but in our DNA and in the very soil beneath our feet. We have traveled across continents. We've seen towers that touch the sky, masks that bridge the spirit world, and cities swallowed by the sea. But for our final discovery, we are going to look at something much smaller, much more fragile, and honestly, much more human. We are returning to the Levant, to the slopes of Mount Carmel in Israel. Here, in a place called Raqefet Cave, archaeologists found the traces of a people known as the Natufians. The Natufians are a bridge in human history. They lived between 11,000 and 15,000 years ago. They were the first people to stop wandering and start building permanent homes, even before they fully invented farming. But it's not their houses that shock us. It's their graves. In 2013, researchers led by Danny Nadel were excavating the floor of the cave when they found something extraordinary. They discovered 29 skeletons buried in pits. But, as they looked closer at the mud at the bottom of these graves, they noticed something strange. Tiny, microscopic impressions. Using advanced scanning technology, they realized they weren't looking at random dirt. They were looking at the ghosts of plants, specifically flowers. 12,000 years ago, before the invention of the wheel, before the first word was ever written, the Natufians were lining the graves of their dead with thick, colorful carpets of wild flowers. Through botanical analysis, we know exactly what they chose. They picked aromatic plants like mint and sage. They used bright blossoms like the Judas tree. Imagine the scene: a dark cave, the smell of damp earth, and the overwhelming, sweet scent of fresh mint and sage filling the air as a family says goodbye to a loved one. This is a massive shock to our understanding of the ancient mind. For a long time, we thought primitive funerals were just about disposing of a body. But the use of flowers tells us something different. It tells us about empathy. It tells us about beauty. It tells us that 12,000 years ago, people were already trying to soften the blow of death with the beauty of nature. But the Natufians had one more surprise for us. In a nearby site called Ain Malaha, archaeologists found a grave that is perhaps the most touching discovery in all of history. It is the skeleton of an elderly person, buried lying on their side. And resting right under their left hand is the skeleton of a puppy. This is the earliest evidence of the bond between humans and dogs. 12,000 years ago, we didn't just see animals as food or tools. We saw them as friends. We saw them as family. This person loved their dog so much that they wanted to spend eternity with their hand resting on its head. These discoveries in the caves of Israel are a reminder that while our technology has changed beyond recognition in 10,000 years, our hearts have stayed exactly the same. We have always felt the sting of loss. We have always reached for beauty in our darkest moments. And we have always looked for companionship in the creatures around us. From the enduring mysteries that challenge our understanding of ancient civilizations to the astonishing archaeological discoveries that continuously rewrite humanity's earliest chapters, it's clear our past is a tapestry woven with both riddles and revelations. The quest for knowledge never truly ends. With every artifact unearthed, every ancient text deciphered, we peel back another layer of time, drawing closer to the truth of who we are and where we came from. What do you think is the most compelling ancient mystery or the most significant discovery? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more journeys into the depths of history.